So got 24 hours after the World Bank released a new report warning that the global economy is standing precariously. A similar report was released today by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, known as OECD. That report says that global economic recovery will be weak despite signs of improvement. The report projects a moderation of GDP growth to 2.7% this year from 3.3% last year. So let's take excerpts from the executive summary of the new report as presented earlier today by OECD Secretary General Matthias Cormann.
Global economy has begun to improve. We are projecting a recovery over 2023 and 2024. However, at this point, it is a recovery to low global growth. The economic indicators are showing some improvement. However, by historical standards, in the first quarter of 2023, global GDP growth remained at a subpar rate. Business confidence, particularly in service sectors, has improved markedly relative to late 2022. However, manufacturing sectors are still relatively weak. Consumer confidence indicators in major economies have started to recover from the very low levels reached last year, but overall, they also remain weak. The improvements in activity and sentiment come among a lowering in energy prices, easing headline inflation, and better prospects brought on by China's reversal of its zero-COVID policy in December last year. We project global GDP to grow at a rate of 2.7% this year and 2.9% next year. This projected recovery, while almost unchanged from our interim projections in March, maintains the slightly more optimistic outlook that had been predicted and which we are now seeing materialize. But the upturn remains fragile. Risks remain tilted to the downside. We have significant policy challenges ahead of us. There is the uncertainty caused by the global impact of Russia's continuing war of aggression against Ukraine, and also other geopolitical tensions. Gas shortages were avoided in Europe this winter, and major disruptions in oil markets did not occur. But we need to remain vigilant, as some of the favorable conditions that helped to reduce energy demand this past year, like a mild winter in Europe, may not be repeated next year. And global demand for LNG is also expected to be impacted by recovery in demand in China. Beyond energy markets, geopolitical tensions are putting significant pressure on the rules-based international trading system, which has been a key driver of growth and development progress over decades. A persistent inflation, the potential impact of the measures required to durably tackle it, is another key downside risk. Headline consumer price inflation in the OECD is projected to come down from 9.4% last year to 6.6% this year and 4.3% in 2024. This expected decline in inflation reflects the impact of restrictive monetary policy, lower energy and food prices, and reduced supply bottlenecks. Wholesale natural gas prices and oil prices are now back to where they were in mid-2021. However, we are yet to unwind the inflation problem. Core inflation is proving persistent on the back of strong service price increases and higher profits in some sectors. Monetary policy will need to remain restrictive to get inflation durably down to target. The monetary policy tightening cycle since the start of 2022 has been rapid, strong, and globally synchronized, and it is working its way through our economies through higher borrowing costs and declines in house prices. While this remains necessary, it could continue to expose pre-existing vulnerabilities, including and in particular financial market vulnerabilities, given high levels of corporate and household debt. Policymakers need to carefully monitor the risk that tighter financial conditions trigger stress in the financial system or in housing markets. For many workers, high inflation has meant real wage declines, although employment levels on the upside have held up very strongly. Our employment outlook, to be published next month, will give further in-depth analysis of the latest developments we see in labour markets. Fiscal policy should support monetary policy in taming inflation, and it should remain prudent to minimise the risks associated with high government debt. Budget deficits and debt levels are both higher than before COVID-19 in almost all countries. Our sovereign borrowing outlook, released 2 weeks ago, forecasts that government borrowing needs will rise in 2023 again, due largely to support measures for households and businesses in response to high inflation. And it also shows that costs for government borrowing more than doubled between 2021 and 2022 and will rise again further in 2023. An important step will be to unwind broad fiscal support and to better target fiscal support measures. The decline in energy prices from their 2022 peaks and recent increases in minimum wages and welfare benefits to take account of past inflation provide this opportunity. This would also help reinforce monetary policy in tackling inflation and help avoid entrenching the undesirable distortionary impacts on production and consumption decisions. While responding to the immediate economic challenges, policymakers must also lay the groundwork for growth longer term, to optimise the strength and the quality of the economic recovery, to boost productivity, including through reforms promoting competition, reviving investment, increasing female workforce participation, and alleviating supply constraints. To address the challenges associated with population ageing and, of course, to secure the green and digital transformations of our economies. Policymakers need to act to enhance business dynamism, reduce barriers to cross-border trade and economic migration, and foster adaptable and inclusive labour markets, including by enhancing skills. The outlook we are presenting today includes a special chapter dedicated to women's economic empowerment, setting out policy recommendations, including on expanding flexible work arrangements, addressing tax and benefit disincentives, and improving access to childcare. It highlights that removing structural barriers and discrimination to realise gender equality must be a high priority to boost long-term economic well-being and prosperity. Because to boost global growth to its full potential, we must draw on all available talent. Closing gaps in labour force participation and working hours could result in an average boost to GDP of 9.2% across OECD countries by 2060, adding 0.23 percentage points to average annual growth. Some progress has been made, but gender employment and wage gaps are declining at a slow pace across OECD countries, warranting further policy measures.